Hey folks, it's Rob Flux here with another Sunday session, and today we're talking about underground services and how to locate all of them through the Before You Dig Australia website. Now, in order to do that, I'm going to introduce to you Leon from Before You Dig Australia. So Leon, mate, welcome to the show. Underground services is a fairly big topic, but it's really all about everything you can't see. Is that correct?
That's right, Rob, and thanks for inviting me along. It's a pleasure to be here. Yeah, it's one of the important things about Before You Digs. It's a mindset. It's the app and the service is showing you some things, but more importantly, we want to talk about things that you don't see.
Very good. Well, Before You Dig Australia, let's. Who are they? Where did they come from? What's the background that sits behind this service and why it actually exists, mate?
Yeah, well, unfortunately, a lot of people are not aware of it, but it actually dates back almost 40 years, would you believe? So back in 1984, there was an incident in Perth, and a major gas main was hit by a contractor doing work for another asset company. Unfortunately, one of the biggest risks to any asset is another asset company. The poor gentleman struck a rather large gas main, huge fireball. He was very lucky to escape from it. It buckled train lines. It brought the power lines down because they started to sag under the heat. So yeah, it was a major incident. A few years after that, 1987 to be precise, they started what was called the Perth One Call system, and that was for anyone doing excavation work anywhere in Perth, in the greater Perth metropolitan area. It sort of grew from there. Each state adopted a dial before you dig. Every state and territory. So, for instance, they were merged, like Victoria, Tas was merged, New South Wales, ACT, etc., SA, Northern Territory. They all had their own dial before you dig. Damage prevention officers like me, educational people, a board, etc. And then about 2 years ago, all of those dial before you digs in every state, they merged. They came together, one organisation, so one set of guidelines, one pricing structure, etc. We came as one company, one national message, and with a very strong focus on safety. At the end of the day, we are safety ambassadors. Our role is out there to protect the people. You do everything right, and the assets will take care of themselves. That's what we go out and preach. But yeah, so we've been around for about 40 odd years.
In various guises. Now, I remember when it was called dial before you dig, and a lot of people use that vernacular dial, and that's because once upon a time you actually had to pick up the phone and dial. And back when I was doing it, it was a rotary phone, and it was 1100. And I recall the very first website being 1100.com.au. But things have changed since then, mate.
Yeah, correct. And it was dialbeforeyoudig.com.au or 1100.com.au. It's the same website. And that was a national website, but you then were directed to your state organisation depending on your location. Yeah, as I said, 2 years ago, we not only did we change the name because you say no one dials anymore, everything's done online. Even 2 years ago, everything, 99% of the inquiries were done online. I actually have to go and explain to some young apprentices what the term dial means and how we had to pick up phones and speak to each mate's mum and all that sort of stuff. But yeah, everything's done online now. And majority of us do the web service, through your laptop, your desktop, etc., or through the app. And the app is very easy to use, and encourage everyone to go and download it. It's absolutely free to use. So yeah.
And what's your role here at Before You Dig Australia, Leon?
Yeah, so officially I'm the New South Wales Damage Prevention and Education Officer, and my territory extends everything between the Murray, the Tweed and Broken Hill, and I try to get out to as many people and get in front of as many people as I can, and just tell the importance of working safely around utilities, because as I say, we're about protecting people. The most valuable asset that any organisation, any family, any community has is the people.
Yeah, well, you only get to die once, I've found, so yeah. We've had some previous presentations with other safety type organisations as well, and all of it is really there for our own protection and also the protection of everyone around us. So anything we can do, prevention is better than cure by a long way.
Yeah, absolutely right, and with foresight, and we can engineer a lot of these things out of the project with a foresight. But at the end of the day, we are about protecting people. Assets can be replaced. It's a little harder to replace people.
Yeah, and so I guess the secondary outcome is the fact that we actually get to see the assets that are actually sitting underneath. Now, us as property developers, we're interested in knowing where the assets are for all of our due diligence processes and that sort of thing. But I guess the service is there for the safety, but it's something that anyone can use at any point in time. So, mate, what's it cost to use Dial Before You Dig? Or sorry, Before You Dig Australia?
No, my apology accepted. Well, I still use the term "dial before you dig" every now, because I've been dealing with this for about 20 years. I was a professional locator for many years and a trainer and assessor in the field, and now I work. I'm lucky enough to work for Before You Dig Australia. The cost is borne by the asset owners. So I just tell people, don't look. It's a free service. If you make a mistake inquiry, lodge another inquiry. And make sure your plans are up to date. A lot of things people forget that the plans actually do go out of date. But yeah, look, it's paid for by the asset owner, and every time you lodge an inquiry, they put a few cents in our bank account, and it is, let me tell you, it's measured in cents, not dollars, to run this. They put the money in to contribute towards the running of the service. We're a not-for-profit organisation. We're not here to fleece money out of people. We don't want to take money off people. We just want to keep the service running to protect people.
Yeah, and which means that I guess the charge is to the service provider, which means one of your roles is to actually go out and convince all the different service providers to subscribe to the service. It's potential that not every service provider in your particular area is covered. So firstly, what are some of the things that are covered in most instances?
Yeah, so generally the critical assets. Now, the overwhelming majority of your critical assets, energy providers, electricity, gas, and then your essential services like water, sewer, telecommunications. The overwhelming majority of those will be providers to the Before You Dig service. And they own the information that they send out to you. Where we do have a little bit of a gap, one of the gaps that we have is in some of the local councils around the country may not be, for various reasons, may not be members of Before You Dig Australia. They think they have a good service where you just give them a call and they'll provide the maps. And the other thing is the knowledge gap is that we also are concerned with the main services. So, for instance, we generally should be able to provide you information regarding the gas main in the street, not necessarily the gas main that comes into your property. And the same thing with the water, telco, electricity. It sort of stops at the property boundary. However, there could be utilities running through your backyard. There could be a sewer line, a drainage line, even telecommunications lines run through your property, etc. They could be running through there. If they're a main service controlled and managed by the asset owner, the utility company, they should be on the Before You Dig service.
Yeah, and that's obviously subject to the accuracy of that service provider in their record keeping back in the day when the original service actually went in. I've had many instances where people in our community have done the correct searches, and then I guess when they've actually gone to dig things up, they've actually found services that were not documented, and that I guess provider was listed. And it's really just because back in the day, people things were done by paper. Electronic record keeping wasn't that accurate back then. So, what is the level of accuracy we can anticipate for a service like this?
Well, unfortunately, it's Australian Standard 5488 is the national standard that covers the subsurface utility information. Now, the information provided through the Before You Dig service stands at quality level D under that standard, which is our lowest quality level, and it also states that there's no spatial accuracy whatsoever. It's just an indication that there is something there. You can imagine that some of these assets and some of these companies we're dealing with have been in existence more than 150 years. The record keeping wasn't great, and I often explain to people that the information you're getting through Before You Dig might have once upon a time been written on the back of a beer coaster at the end of a hard day's work. You just never know the quality of that information, the source of that. These are network maps that were designed to be handed out to network technicians. When they started taking these records many years ago, their intention was to keep a record to show another technician how the network is designed, joined to the network, like a wiring diagram, but no spatial accuracy whatsoever, just an approximation. Something out there, you need to go and look for it.
Which means that I guess we need to do a little bit more investigative work, and we'll touch on how to do that in a couple of secs. But how do we get to know, I guess, what is actually being covered on our particular site? So we've got a site inquiry, but how do we know what providers are covered and what ones are not covered?
Okay, so the first thing I'd suggest to everyone is to open up the app or the web and put your search area in there. You know, if you're first time user, you register as a user because it's some privacy matters for the telecommunications industry, etc. But yeah, register to use. It's free, as I say. You always take advantage of something that's free. Put your inquiry search in there, and immediately you've drawn your little map that you want to put of your search area where you need to do some work. Straight away, the asset owners who are registered members of Before You Dig Australia, who have assets in the vicinity of your search area, they will be notified. You'll get a list straight away. I always tell people the first thing you want to look to see if your local council has been named, because unfortunately a lot of little smaller LGAs and some of the bigger ones, for that matter, in some of the capital cities, are not members of Before You Dig for a host of different reasons. So always make sure you've got a response from them, and double check the response when it comes in. For instance, in my local council, I won't name them, but my local LGA, they will say that they've been notified, but you may not get a response or a map of their assets in where you want to dig. They tend to have just one asset they've got. They've taken great care and responsibility for a recycled water main that they've installed to water the sports fields, and I applaud them for doing that. This recycled water facility is fantastic. It saves swimming pools of water every year. However, the local stormwater network in my area won't come up. Just that recycled water main will come up. So yeah, so always double check with the council. That's the other thing. Now, as I said before, we'll only be concerned with the mains, the gas main, the water main, the sewer main, etc. How your property is connected to those mains probably won't appear, and private assets contained within your property definitely won't appear. So yeah, they won't win. So for instance, the power line, if you've got an underground power cable going from the back of your house or your laundry, and then it goes out to an outbuilding, a shed or something like that, that's not going to be on there. Water, etc., drainage, they won't appear. And to do that, you know, if you want to find that, you can employ a professional locator to come out and assist you with that one. That is obviously not part of our service. Our deal is to get you access to the maps. That's what we do. And once you've got the maps in your hand, the plans from the asset owners, the process of making your site safer and more economical is in there, therefore in your hands after that. Our contractual obligation has been filled once the maps are in your hand. My role, go out and promote it. I go out and tell people to use it, the ease of using it, what it can give you, what it won't give you, how you make your site safer, and make sure that everyone goes home in one piece, all their digits attached at the end of the day.
Yeah. So you touched on a key word there, asset. Now, once upon a time, going way back in history, I used to work inside Darwin City Council. And so I was the IT manager in there. So I was very familiar with working with their internal teams, and everything was an asset, from a park bench to I guess the road itself and all sorts of things. So what is an asset in your world?
Okay, so we're predominantly talking about underground utilities, or utilities per se. So the things that you require, and remember that these are the community's assets. The community's relying on these utilities to be running. And I always tell people, your first obligation is to protect yourself. Look after number one. Your second obligation is to protect your workmates, the people working on your site, and the contractors that come on, the person and you might be a small business, and the workmate next to you is a family member. It's your wife, it's your brother, it's your cousin, or something like that. There's so much importance on protecting them and keeping them safe. Third obligation, the community. You want to keep the community connected. People have a fundamental right to drinking water, to safe drinking water, clean drinking water. They want the electricity. They want the internet to be running. If you've got teenage kids at home, you want the internet to be running when you get home at the end of the day. So we are about protecting that. It could be your neighbour who's got a dialysis machine requiring electricity and water. There could be someone who has a panic button. If they have a fall or something like that, they might be connected to the house phone. So those sorts of things. We are, and your small business, your cousin down the street might have a small business out of the backyard. It could be bespoke brewing or designer jewelry or whoever knows what. Yeah, but we're talking about the community's assets. I don't really care for the companies that own these. I care about the community being connected.
Yeah, and the other thing that you touched on, LGAs, local government associations, I guess, depending upon which government LGA you're actually dealing with, some of them have some infrastructure, but not others. So in some instances, they'll look after the stormwater. In other instances, they won't. That'll be an external provider. So how do we actually get a list of, well, we know what our LGA is, but how do we actually work out, well, what are they actually in charge of?
Yeah, no, that's a good question actually, and you'd have to go back to every LGA's website to be fully across it all. The good thing I always tell people, just okay, what does a house require? What does a property require? You know, telecommunications, electricity, water, drainage, all of those things. So just be going through in your mind. Okay, I've got a response from that company. Oh, they handle sewer. I've got a response from that company. They do the water. Okay, they do the electricity, etc. So that step-by-step process of making sure, have you covered all the bases? Those sorts of things. That's always the first one to go off. In a lot of rural LGAs and local governments, there might be a conglomeration or another company's been set up by several LGAs to handle one particular asset. There might be several LGAs have banded together their water resources and teams and equipment and people to form a company that might cover several different LGAs. We have a local government in the southern area of New South Wales. They have 3 different water providers, would you believe, depending on the various parts of their network. And so, yeah, that's not always one. So you do need to go through and double check. If any doubt, ring your LGA, get your responses in, and then ring your LGA to make sure everything has been covered.
Yeah, so you touched on a very powerful thing. What does a house actually need in order to connect? There's 5 things that must have. So water, sewer, stormwater, electricity, telecommunications. Those 5 it must have. And then there's optionally, you may actually also have gas, which is subject to the area that is actually whether or not there's there. And then there's that's what we need. And then there's, well, what else is just passing by? Because in order to get to one spot to another spot, so I can provide services to something else. So there might be other optional things that are actually sitting in front of you that, and you touched on telecommunications. That's a really big one, and electricity, where they need to provide connectivity to many people, and quite often with significant size infrastructure sitting underneath the ground, or even sometimes above ground.
Yeah, exactly. So, like for instance, some of the older areas of the ACT in Canberra, they have a lot of the utilities run through the backyard. There'll be telegraph poles in the backyard, and that's where the power and in some cases telecommunications might come through. And most times you will require an easement. Electricity running through your property to your neighbour's place, there's going to be an easement for access, an easement for drainage, etc. The Telecommunications Act is a federal act, and they don't actually require an easement through your property to run a cable through your property. So yeah, the quickest point to get to your neighbour might be through your yard, and I'm talking more likely your larger rural properties. But yeah, they don't actually require an easement. So you may not be aware that something, your neighbour might be requiring something that runs through your property and you have no idea of it. So it's always good, lodge it before you dig inquiry, and that should come up.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've covered roughly what our services cover. Is there an actual list of all the different asset providers, so we can actually work out whether or not, I guess, the local authority in our areas is actually a subscriber to your service? Because it's not a mandatory service, is it?
No, you're absolutely right. It's not mandatory for any organisation, and the only reason that is New South Wales for energy providers. So New South Wales has its own legend, just energy providers, so gas and electricity, oil, petroleum, gas, etc., oil, anything provides, can provide heat. They are mandated legislation that they must be members of Before You Dig. But on the flip side of that, about if you do the wrong thing and one of those out, but I might talk about that a little bit further down the track. But for everyone else, it's optional. We go out there, we strongly encourage them. We're not a legal authority. We have no jurisdiction to force people to do that. It's up to every individual company to be members of Before You Dig. But you can, if you wanted to have a check, you can go to our website, or you can open up the app and you go to the members page. There's a little drop-down bar that says members, and you can go down at the LGA, water, telcos, gas, etc. and that. So I think a lot of us have 106 members of Before You Dig. For instance, look at each one individually, open up each, also telecommunications, etc. Telecommunications page, you open up, there's 40 different telcos in the country that are members, and that's I'm guarantee that's not everyone. There also could be one organisation that might own several companies too. So you might see a little telecommunications pit lid out the front of your house with one name on it, And you could go to our organisation and to our page and find, oh, that name hasn't come up, but it could be owned by another company. So it's a really tough one. With companies get swallowed up, get absorbed, go broke. We had a massive company, WorldCom, go broke many years ago. Their assets got absorbed and taken in by other companies. So that you might have a WorldCom pit lid, but you'll get a response from, I think it's TPG might take care of that one now. So.
Yeah. So and lots in there. So so the opposite, and I already know the answer, but I'm going to ask the question anyway. How do we know who's not listed?
Oh, good question. So the best thing to do to go out is get your site checked by a professional locator, and this is where they earn their money. That's a contract between you, the inquirer, and the professional locator that you employ. They will come out, and 90% of locating is done with your eyes. The tools and instruments they use are, it's not. And speaking from experience, as I said, 12 or 13 years as a professional locator. What it comes down to is they know what to look for, and they're going to look for those other things, and they're going to go through that methodical process. Okay, what does that building need to operate? What does that building? And they're going to have that local knowledge. Generally speaking, you're usually going to employ someone from your area. You don't want to be paying 6 hours of travel time or anything like that. So you're going to get someone who knows your neighbourhood, and they're going to go to look for those things. And they might have phone numbers they can ring someone from the local council, for instance, or they might have someone who can, from a communications company, can provide better access to better plans. So when you employ a professional locator, not only are you going through that second step, remember, before you dig inquiry is just the first essential step. The second one, get your site prepared by a professional locator. They go through, they have a look at it. They're using the tools and equipment, the EMF locating, ground penetrating radar or GPR. But more importantly, they're using their skills and experience to go and find those things. And they'll be able to tell you, and as I say, local knowledge, and they'll say, hey, your council's not a member, so let's ring them up and chase them up and get some plans, etc. Yeah, they're the best ones to give you local advice.
Yeah, I guess during our initial, as property developers, during our initial due diligence stage, before we've actually acquired a site, we may not require that level of detail just yet. But once we actually get it under due diligence, we definitely want to be using those services to actually, know not just does it exist, but exactly where it exists. Because you touched on before, the accuracy of these is more indicative in nature rather than, hey, it's in this exact spot. And whilst there's some legislative requirements in how deep the water should be, electricity should be, and those sorts of things, it doesn't actually always translate to being reality.
Yeah, there's a couple of things you touched on there, Rob, and I'm going to come out and talk about is that you got to remember the depths change over the years. Now, surface level change, that could be landscaping, erosion, tree roots could push a surface much shallower. If you've got Queensland brush box or you've got some ficus trees or something like that, they're going to move assets around. Now, the more flexible an asset, like a direct buried cable, fibre, electricity, etc., a nylon gas pipe, they will be moved around by other things. As I said, the surface levels can change. Something that was buried 20 years ago or 30 years ago, and it was buried at 400 millimetres deep through roadworks, erosion, hard landscaping, driveways, footpaths, etc., might only now be 200 deep. So you can't rely on the depth of something. So there's one thing, but so the depth is one thing. The location is another thing. Fences move. People might have put an asset in the ground 40 years ago, taken a tape measure and measured it off the fence. Someone's come along, moved the fence, the boundary has moved, etc. They might have measured off a curb, the curb might have moved. So those things, what we call relative spatial positioning, relative to another feature, they change. Absolute spatial positioning doesn't. So if you've got your surveyors to come out and measure it and locate these things and record that stays in perpetuity. You put it on the mapping grid, put it on Australian height data, that stays the same. The other things, so those relative distances change. The other thing, as I said, the accuracy of what they were put in the ground is never great. And these are network maps for network technicians.
Yeah, and we've got to give some credit to them back in the day. A lot of those technologies didn't exist. So GPS didn't exist, for example.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so depending upon the age of the asset, we've got to have some, I guess, understanding of the fact that there is going to be that level of inaccuracy. And as you touched on, even if it was accurate at the time, even if they were super accurate in how they did it, they may have done it as a relative distance to to a curb and channel. That curb and channel is now relocated. So the map says one thing, but reality is something else. So
exactly right. Yeah, exactly right. You know,
so there's always things to lay out.
Europeans have been putting things in the ground for 200 years, more than 200 years. And said, I live in Sydney, and the tank stream in Sydney was one of the first assets to be covered over. You know, so we've got a long history of that. And as you say, the accuracy and the topography, the surface levels, all of these things change over time. But you're getting back to you spoke before about as a property developer, you might have an idea in your head, and I'm one of those persons that gets those things at 3:30 in the morning when I'm lying awake twiddling my thumbs. There's no reason to go online, get the free plans, and straight away you can start doing concept plans. You can start doing concept, and you're okay. Well, these are the things we're going to have to deal with. These are the things that we can't move. Like it's a sewer main running through that property. That's going to be a tough one. We can't really move that without substantial engineering. However, if you've got electrical assets, be it overhead or underground in your vicinity, we can get those moved. Telecommunications, mate, we can get those moved. Gas, oil, water, we can get those things. Anything under pressure, we can get it moved. I'm not going to lie, they're going to charge you an arm and a leg to do that, these companies. You employ telco engineers to come along and redesign and move assets. It does cost money, but they're not game changers. As I say, the real critical ones, things that rely on gravity and gradient. So sewer and drainage, they're the big critical ones. If they're running through your site, they are game changers. You're going to have to accommodate them into your design. All of those other things, let's play around with it. And as I say, you get online, lodge your inquiry. Straight away, you've got some idea. Oh, okay, that's in the vicinity. And the other one is you can find out about the overhead services. Do you have overhead power lines running across the property? Oh, hey, there's an app for that. Look Up and Live. You can go and jump onto that one. But we'll talk about that.
We'll talk about that in 2 seconds because you guys have recently acquired Look Up and Live. So I'm just going to put a pin drop in that for the moment. We'll loop back around.
We're very proud of our new baby, I've got to say, Rob. So
I'm sure we are. We've had a presentation from Look Up and Live previously with Cookie way back in the day. But, mate, how does somebody submit an inquiry? So firstly, we've got the website down below. So beforeyoudigaustralia.com.au. So they go to there. What happens from there?
Okay, for a new user, you would have to register. You get an email to confirm, and that's your registration process. And once you're in, you're logged in, and you can stay logged in on your own device or your own phone, etc. You can do it on your phone or your iPad. We've got the platform for both Android and Apple. So it's lost for words there. We do have the platform covering both. Yeah, free to use, both equally easy. But if you've got a laptop, even better. Look at it on a bigger screen. You can start bringing those plans in straight away. But you go in there, you put in your search address on the app. You can use location services, so it knows where you are straight away. You just zoom in on your local area. There's a couple of different options. You can. There's a line drawing tool, so you'll get a map of your area of interest the suburb or whatever it is you want to look at. You use a drawing tool. Okay, that's approximately my site boundary, or that's where I want to dig just on my site. Remember, you don't have to do your whole property. If you're only concerned about what's at a certain part, you can just make a small inquiry. Use those drawing tools. You hit submit straight away. Before you dig, will not only they'll send you an email confirming it, but on your screen you'll get a list of the Before You Dig members who have been notified because their area of interest overlaps your search area. And that's how the system works. So, for instance, Telstra, massive network, coast to coast, all across the country, some of the offshore islands as well. You can't lodge an inquiry and not get a response from them. In my local area, I'd get my local council, I'd get the energy provider, the electricity provider where I live is Ausgrid. They will be notified. The gas company in my area, it's Gemini. They will be notified. All of these names will pop up on the screen straight away.
So you'll get that list, and then you have to go back in your head to those 5 that I mentioned that are mandatory and go,
yep.
Have I got all 5?
Yep.
And then over and above that, there might be a couple of optionals. So if those 5 are not there, then there's a clue in your head, go, hey, I need to start looking somewhere else.
Absolute trigger. And it might be there's no gas in your neighbourhood.
Yeah.
So as you said, that's one of the optionals.
Yeah, it's one of the optionals. So we need to go, well, is there gas in the area? Do I require gas for any development I'm doing, or is that just going to get in the way if I'm actually doing some work? But straight away we know, okay, we're expecting 4, 5, 6 different responses to come back. What's the timeline for those to come back?
Look, some of them are instantaneous, and we say you should have everything within 48 hours. We are always encouraging our members to improve their response times. delays may occur. You might have one of the organisations may have a system upgrade or something going on in the process, so you might get a delay. But generally speaking, you'll get things happening straight away. You'll get responses. Look, I'd say on average, our turnaround is 2 hours. You can get a suburban site in a built-up area. You'll generally get everything within about 2 hours. And so we do get delays from time to time for other parties and whatnot having a system upgrade. But yeah, generally speaking, and that's a vast improvement from when I started 20 years ago. It was 2 weeks. I had to wait 2 weeks. And in some of those instances, I would have to jump in my car and go and drive to a place to pick up a set of, A0 or A1 printed plans, and have to go through them. And, there'd be a 4-hour turnaround just in going from my place to the office and then to the site to do the work. So, yeah, we're quite proud of that improvement, but we are always striving for better.
Yeah. So just to be clear, 48 hours is what I guess the worst case scenario will be. You'll get the trigger will be how many services are provided straight up front.
Yep.
You'll get an email that says, hey, these are how many providers have actually been contacted.
Mm-hmm.
And then one by one, you'll then start to get emails from each of those different providers.
No, you did once upon a time, so it is true, and I will come back to that. At the moment, we have a portal service, so imagine like a virtual suitcase. When all of the plans have been put in the suitcase, we'll send you a second email to say your plans are ready to download through the portal. If you like the old way, if you like to get in those individual responses, you can go back into your user profile on the desktop site, go to your user profile and change your response requirements, how you receive that, if you want to go back to the old way. But yeah, once upon a time it was individuals. Now it's first email from Before You Dig saying thank you for your inquiry, we're on it. The second one is your plans are now ready to download. And as I say, that takes about 2 hours. And I would often go out and do a demonstration to a team for plan reading at an LGA or an engineering company or a civil company, etc. Before I leave home, I will lodge an inquiry for out the front of their place, and by the time I've arrived there and I'm presenting the session, I can bring the plans up. That's how quick it usually is.
Yeah. Well,
the other thing is,
I'm old school, mate. I still get the emails. So
yeah, and some people prefer that, and then they know that they can, little triggers, and that's just a personal preference. You also get a list of phone numbers to contact too. So if you haven't received a response, or you need to do work urgently, you can get those numbers and you can start ringing straight away. Now, for urgent responses, just because you might be out there doing emergency work or something's ruptured or whatever, for whatever reason, that doesn't mean you don't do it before you dig. Still lodge your inquiry and straight away pick up the phone and start ringing up those phone numbers, because most of them will have a 24-hour response, people who can come out and assist you for genuine emergency work. If it's something that was planned, then that's different.
Yeah, and the key point is that second email to say, hey, all of your inquiries are back. So at that point, you know that you don't have to wait the 48 hours anymore. You may have got that in 5 minutes. You may have got that in 2 hours. You may get that in the whole 48 hours. But when you get that second one, you've now got the complete set. Look at the 5. So power, water, sewer, stormwater, and telecommunications, and go, what's missing? And then over and above that, what is then optional over and above? So
and even if, like, a good example, your electricity provider, even if you are in a neighbourhood where all of your electrical assets are overhead, they're still going to have poles in the ground. So they need to be thought about, and they will come up on your Before You Dig plans. There's still going to be earth grids in the ground or at the base of some of these poles, so they will need to be thought about. So yeah, there's a whole lot of things. Like, for instance, there are regulations about how close you can dig next to a telegraph pole, with it before you're starting to compromise the structural integrity of that pole. So yeah, even if your assets are overhead, they still should appear in your Before You Dig search.
And we'll touch on those in 2 secs, but there's always the areas where there are services that were overhead and now they're transitioning to all underground. And so you've got the mixed outcomes of some of those. So you've got to be super careful, irrespective.
Exactly, and one doesn't cancel out the other. You can have both overhead and underground in the same neighbourhood. Yeah.
So from a technology perspective, they've triggered on your website. A whole bunch of alerts have gone off, but it's not actually yourselves that own the data. You've put the request out to the different providers, and it's the providers themselves that are actually responding to that, which is why it's a little bit of a mixed timeline. Is that correct?
That's absolutely right. And some providers have got great response times, and some are they dragging their feet, shall we say? But there's also other requirements too. That it could be that someone needs to double check that search area, because if you're working around a critical network route, high pressure gas or a transmission gas line or transmission electricity, there might be another response that gets triggered, and it might be a phone call. You might be working in the ACT and there are cables and networks down there for telecommunications that you won't actually get a plan for, but you will get a phone call and someone will come out and have a look at your site and have a chat, because they're quite secretive about those things. So it just depends on the area you're in. So there's all sorts of different things that can get triggered depending on the activity you're doing. So for instance, if you're doing hand excavation, that's not going to be such a risk as if you were doing vertical, horizontal drilling or boring or something like that. And if you're using explosives, for instance, and yes, we do get inquiries for people using explosives because we have people in the mines and whatnot doing that. So they still need to be. So each one of those responses triggers, each one of those inquiries and parameters you put in there can trigger a different response.
So we've now got our responses. We now know that something exists, and we've touched on the fact that the accuracy is not always as good as we would like. From a due diligence perspective, as a property developer, we know, hey, A, we can actually connect our 5 services and whatever optionals, and B, we know what some of the dangers are that we may need to navigate around from a cost perspective. We get into due diligence phase, and that's when we go, right, we need to improve the level of accuracy here. And that's where the professional locators can start to come in. So these guys will come out on site and do a physical inspection using a range of technologies to then, I guess, go to that next level of detail. So firstly, what is a physical locator? And can I get do I have to be certified in order to do this? So how do I determine if my guy's any good?
Yeah, I always tell people to check the credentials. So as you're talking, the first step is getting the plans, and we do have a process we call the 5 Ps of safe work around utilities or safe excavation. The first one, plan, and you've done that. You've got your plans from before you dig, and you've got all your responses, and you read the duty of care, because the different assets have different requirements about how close you can get to them with different pieces of equipment. For instance, vibrating rollers, excavators, shovels, etc., star pickets. And yeah, the second P is prepare your site with a professional locator and get someone out there and ask them to show their credentials. Another one is word of mouth too. Like a good locating company will pride themselves on their reputation because they want repeat business. The better accuracy and the better response and the more care they take on each site, that means better referrals. So they're going to check that. There is a certifying organisation, and you can ask the locator to show their credentials from that certifying organisation. But yeah, we also get to prepare. These people are the bread and butter is to go out and look for the utilities, and as I said, they're staking their reputation and more importantly, people's lives upon their results. And there is a range of equipment they'll use. And one doesn't replace the other. There's 2 main pieces of equipment they'll use. As an EMF locating device, and you often see people, they'll have the transmitter box connected one end, and they'll be waving a little wand pointing down to the ground. People think it's a metal detector. It's not. It's a radio receiver. It's looking for radio waves. So the transmitter puts a signal onto a service. Now that service needs to be metallic. It could be a copper water pipe, cast iron water pipe. Electricity cables are always metallic, so that's it. Old copper telecommunication lines could be still buried in the ground alongside in the same conduit as a fibre, so we can trace those as well. Steel gas pipes, for instance, we can trace those. Anything metallic, we can use that EMF locating device. And what we do, we go and put a unique frequency on that. We chase that unique frequency along the ground, and we can determine its location, its line, and its depth. Now, the accuracy that they're giving you falls under that Australian standard I spoke about before, and the quality level there is B. Now, if you've been listening, you know we've jumped a step. We've gone from D to B. C is if I stand on the Telstra pit lid or whatever asset, and I see the Telstra pit lid down the street and it matches the plan, that's C. But your professional locator will both go past that and take you to B. And that's what we call the second P. They'll also use ground penetrating radar. That'll look for things that are non-metallic, stormwater lines, sewer pipes, potentially nylon gas lines, depending on how they've been laid, fibre optic cables in a conduit, etc. But remember, these are just instruments, and we can only determine what the instrument tells us. The best thing to do is to see it with your own eyes. And when you see it with your own eyes, you're confirmed, and that's taking you to quality level A, which I suppose is going to be your next question.
Well, it actually wasn't. I was actually going to go back a step. I'm an old techno nerd, mate. I studied electronics in my first trade, and then I guess computer mechanics, and then IT repair. So I actually understand the technologies that are sitting underneath this. So EMF, electromagnetic force, and it actually works in 3 different directions. What it basically says is an electrical signal will trigger a magnetic force and vice versa. So magnetic force will then trigger electrical signal. So it's using that to say, well, if I can see a metallic object, it's going to distort that magnetic field, and that's going to then give me visibility of where that actually is. So that's how the technology is actually working. So we're introducing that electrical, so that magnetic signal through, I guess, a pulsating magnetic field to then trigger that. Then the ground penetrating radar works a little bit like an ultrasound. So people are familiar with an ultrasound. I guess when your baby's being born, it does the same thing. It transmits radio waves into the ground, and they reflect back. And based on how they, I guess, reflect back and the speed at which they reflect back, then they can then start to say, well, I know how fast it should have been traveling through the ground. I know how long it actually took me to come back. Then they can actually start to draw pictures on a screen with regards to that. So that's how the technologies themselves work, and that's how you find things that are not magnetic. So needs the physical inspection. And then the last one, eyes. Don't ask me how that technology works, mate. I can't see things at the back of the fridge.
It had a boy look, as my wife would say.
Yeah, a man look, yes.
Yep. The ground penetrating radar, look, is it, as I said, one doesn't replace the other. They do complement each other, and any good locating organisation worth their salt is going to come out with both of those pieces of equipment and more. They could have a CCTV as well to do some more detailed inspection work. The GPR takes a little bit of time to set up on site, though. Just remember.
Yeah, the CCTV is a camera on the end of a very large, I guess, cable that they can, I guess, drive through the pipe. And it's usually got a transponder on it, and then they've got a receiver, and they can go, well, I know how far away that transponder is from the receiver, and they can, because it's a camera, they can actually see inside the pipe. So it's not just where is the pipe, but also can go, well, what damage is inside the pipe? So it's actually used multiple purposes in order to get there. The tricky part is, how do you get into the pipe in the first place? And so it could be going through a manhole. It could be going through what is called an ORG, or an ORG, an overflow relief gully. So it's trying to find, I guess, where the safety valve is in case your toilets overflow inside the house, and then stick the camera down there and go in different directions.
Yeah, look, it comes with a whole range of different uses, and that's one of the great ones is that, you can, for instance, if you've got a sewer main running through the property you need to work on, the authority will want a condition report at the start and the end of the job, and that's where the cameras, and they generally are bigger ones and more specialist organisations rather than just locating companies. They will do sewer repair jobs as well, so they'll do sewer repairs, condition reports, etc., and vital, for the integrity of the asset. So you can say, oh yeah, that crack was there before we turned up on site, and here's the document evidence that I've got for that. They can also, as I said, they can do repairs, but that's another great piece of locating equipment is the CCTV. But we can access things through, like you might have a crushed Telstra conduit. That's another great one. You might have equipment moving on site, and if there's not enough cover over that, it will crush the conduit. So you can always run a camera down there at the start and finish to see, okay, well, our site activity has damaged that, or our site activity has no damage, because that was already damaged. So there's a whole range of uses for the CCTV.
Yeah, absolutely. Now I'm going to close a loop here. You said 5 Ps before. So far, we've covered 2 Ps. So plan and prepare. What are the other 3 Ps, please, mate? Okay,
so as I said, seeing is believing. So what they say is they pothole the asset. And a pothole is non-destructive digging. For a bigger project, you'd get a specialist truck in there with a vacuum excavation, using high-pressure water to break the soil, a vacuum to take the spoil away, and you can confirm where the asset is. And as I tell people, seeing is believing. That's the 3rd P, pothole. If you can prove where it is, its actual location, you can get absolute spatial positioning on it. You can get your surveyors in there to record where that asset is. And as I said, that stays in perpetuity, those coordinates. And that's our first three. That gets you to quality level A under the standard. Now, here's where it comes really critical. The two following P's are to protect and proceed. Now, I always talk about protect. The most important thing I want people to protect is people, first and foremost. Right? Protect yourself. You're working near these assets. There are things in the ground that kill people, and I can't put sugar on that and make that sound any nicer. There are some dangerous assets in the ground that do need to be respected. So when they talk about using an asset protection officer to get them to come out on site and give advice, that's legally binding. You have an obligation to do that, to engage with them. If it's high pressure gas, high voltage electrical, yeah, there's going to be requirements on there. You engage with them, because one about protect people. Make sure your people are safe. So yourself, your workmates, the people on your site, the community walking past your site, you have an obligation to protect that under various different legislations on workplace health and safety, but also protect them from the asset. And you want to make sure people are connected to those assets. We want to go home at the end of the day. We want fresh, safe drinking water coming out of the tap. We want the gas so we can cook dinner for the kids. We want the electricity so we can cook dinner. We're going to keep the beer cold in the fridge, the drinks cold in the fridge, the food safe from spoil. We want the internet working because the kids have to do assignments, or you just need to keep them entertained and watching endless screenings of Bluey or something like that to keep them entertained while you're cooking dinner and everything like that. These are fundamental things that we want to make sure that people are connected. There are more critical things like people on dialysis machines and people relying on those things to be connected. So we need to make sure they're all connected. So that's your obligation, is to protect people, all right? If you do everything right, if you respect the no-go zone, you respect the minimum approach distances, the different pieces of equipment you can use around these critical assets, if you do all that right, they will take care of themselves. Those assets will be fine. Assets break down all the time, and we can replace those. We can't replace people. So that's our first 4 P's. And our last one, obviously, proceed. When you've got those, but only when you've got those first 4 P's in place, then you proceed with the work that you need to do. Now, we're going to find things. There's always going to be things in the ground that we don't know about. There are things that are invisible. There are things that no record has been taken of an asset that's been put in the ground. These things are going to happen. We cannot eliminate all risk. We can only reduce the risk. But going through that first 4 P's will stand you in good stead, and you can hand on heart say that you've done it to the best of your ability.
Yeah, and then closing the loop. So we've done everything we can to find these assets up front. As a property developer, we're actually going to be creating some brand new assets at the end of this. And so in many instances, we're actually going to hand over what they call as-cons, as constructed drawings, over to our asset providers. Now, this time round, the level of accuracy is going to be a hell of a lot better, because they're going to mandate that we actually have surveyors come out and we measure the depth, and we know what the size of the pipe is, and we know, the exact geo coordinates, so that the next time somebody does a before you dig search, the level of accuracy is going to get, incrementally better the next time round. So thus completeth the loop.
Exactly right, and it's an ongoing process. Our role at Before You Dig Australia, and our vision for 20 years down the track is that we're going to provide you a 3-dimensional digital model. We always talk about the digital twin, but it's always going to be improved upon. It's always going to be being built. It's never going to be completed. But as we are putting new assets, and you're handing those assets to the asset company, or putting in some new conduits for the electricity company to run the electricity down the street, etc. And hopefully, and unfortunately, not all of them are mandating this, but hopefully they are asking you to give you absolute spatial positioning and have your surveyors map those. Unfortunately, not everyone is that strict about it. So, but yeah, we and again, our role as advocates, both for the asset owners and back to them, we are going them and saying, hey guys, please make sure that your contractors are giving you accurate data, accurate information. We don't want mud maps. We don't want beer coasters anymore. We have the technology, and it's super cheap, super easy to use for people to do that, to go and create great digital records of what they've put in the ground. And things they find, they might find things. And we always tell people, if you find things and are not on the record, locate it, map it, try and identify it. Maybe you can contact all the asset owners, see if someone will come along and say, oh, yeah, that is ours. We forgot to map that. We take ownership. So we do advocate both ways. That's one of the roles we have at Before You Dig Australia.
Yeah. So look, all of that is, we've done everything the right way around. So we've done our prevention, we've done our, our searches and that sort of thing. But every now and then, if we haven't done those steps, mistakes are going to happen. Damage is going to occur, both damage to the asset and potentially safety implications. Other than the, hey, we've broken something, what are the actual implications if we actually get this wrong?
Okay, so there's a couple of things now. One of the critical things is make sure your plans are up to date. So if your project is going to last 6 months or 12 months, etc., you put in your start and or expected finish date for your project. Before you dig Australia will actually provide the option for an auto renew. So you're notified every 28 days that there is an up-to-date, fresh set of plans in your digital suitcase that you can go and download. So always make sure you've got the up-to-date plans on site. Double check that nothing's changed, and most of the time it's not have been changed. But if, as you said, you might be putting in assets that's going to be inherited by the electrical company. Some of those companies might actually start putting those things before you've even finished. They might have projected or predicted work or future work. Those sorts of things come up. So yeah, always make sure your plans are up to date. One of the things that investigators will look for is, have you got before you dig plans? Secondly, are they up to date? And that's all of the asset companies. Now, and as I said, things happen, mistakes happen, for whatever, communication is not great on site or something like that, and something happens. Call that damage in as soon as possible. So ring the telco. If, for instance, if you knock out a fibre, call them as soon as possible. Don't try and kick dirt over it. It's not going to heal itself. Call it in as soon as possible. The quicker you can get these things checked, they might be able to reroute the communication cables, which means your liquidated damages might be much less, because if something's out for a long time, other people relying on that service might have an opportunity to come in and recover their costs from you. So do that thing. If it's electricity or gas, these are critical ones. Call 000. Now, because your workers might be thinking, oh, hang on, am I in this network area or this network area? Ring 000. They know which network area you're in. You ring 000, they go straight through to the control room of that local provider. They get the asset either shut down, they get protection officers out there straight away. If it's a critical asset like a gas leak, they will also get the fire brigade down there. They'll get the police down there. They'll make the site safe, but you're in charge up until they turn up. But there's the thing. These are the life-threatening ones. Yeah, call 000. Don't be second guessing. Hang on, which asset company, which provider am I in? Yeah, get on the 000. They go straight through to the control room. They've got hotlines. Joe Public, you and I, we might be on hold for a little while. So yeah, get those called in. But yeah, any of those ones, and water again, a small water leak can turn into a major problem really quick because of erosion and things like that. And all of a sudden you're starting to get subsidence. The road might not be safe anymore. You might get undermining the integrity of the road. So these things, people think, oh, it's just a water leak. It's not such an urgent thing. They're all urgent. Trust me on that one. Yeah. Some of them might even be a notifiable incident with your regulator too. A sewer rupture and people get splashed with sewer, then that's a critical risk. They might have to go and get checked for Hep B and things like that. Any chance of an electrical shock to someone, they need to be sent off to hospital as soon as possible and be put on an ECG machine to get monitored. Yeah, all of these things are critical.
Yeah. So if I was to break that down and summarize that super simplistically, there's the actual danger, the safety element of that. So go, well, what do we need to do in order to, I guess, mitigate that? There might be some fines, or I guess because we've triggered some legislation with regards to, hey, we didn't do the preventative work in order to do that. So some of those fines can be significant. I guess if you're a significant corporation, they can be upwards of almost $500,000. And individuals, I think, can 22,000 from memory, and potentially 5 years in jail.
Yeah, well, that's just in New South Wales. Other states and territories are looking at it, and some of them. New South Wales is actually looking at doubling theirs. So that is only in New South Wales and only for energy services, so gas, electricity, etc. Only for the energy providers. That's the only one that's mandatory.
And then there's the actual damage itself that you've created. So there's the repair cost, and in order to resolve that particular issue. Then there's the disruption to service. You've impacted somebody's business.
Yep.
And then there's the liquidated damages, which is, well, that business may have other clients, and you've impacted those other clients. And so they're claiming loss of business. So, for example, if you tear up a Telstra line, then how many people rely on, I guess, their phone in order to generate business through their internet or telesales or all sorts of things like that. So liquidated damages can come your direction as well.
Yeah, into the millions, well into the millions.
Yeah. So, I have seen fiber optic cable, I guess, get caught in an auger, and it if you don't turn it off, it just keeps yanking it, and those things will pull for miles. So,
Exactly right.
yeah.
And the damage they've done at the point of contact where it's been disrupted up the street, that you could do damage at the local exchange, you could do damage in a complex housing unit or in a pillar. Yeah, there's a myriad. I always maintain to people, look, the most expensive locating company that you can employ in your local area to come out and help you with the site is going to be far cheaper than any disrupted service. Far, far cheaper. Always do a site handover. Don't get your locator to turn up on one day and you guys turn up a week later to break ground. Always do a site handover. Always ask for maps and plans and things like that. And the really good locating companies will either be able to provide you a digital map straight away or be able to put you in contact with a surveying company that can do that in a very quick turnaround.
Yep.
So yeah, get those records. Always do a site walkthrough.
Yeah. Now, so far we've been talking about before you dig, so everything that's underneath the ground. Recently, you guys have required the Look Up and Live, app, which is, no longer underground, mate. So, what is Look Up and Live?
So Look Up and Live, we think, is a couple of really good things. It's a great tool. It's easy to use. It's an app. It's free to use. You don't even have to register because unlike with Before You Dig, and as I said, there's a requirements regarding telecommunications that mean you have to register. No, it's free, it's easy, it's accessible, and your location services, you open it up, you walk outside. If you've got overhead power poles, take it outside, open up the app, location services, it knows where you are, it will zoom in on your area, and you'll be able to identify the telegraph poles that are right next to you, and importantly, the overhead power cables, because there's different voltages. Now, different voltages have different approach distances, how close you'd safely work around those things. And it will either be 3, 6, or 8, depending on the voltage. 3 meters for an untrained person. It gets a little bit less if you've got the correct training. But yeah, as a standard, it's 3 meters. And once you start getting over to the higher voltage things, it goes up to 6 meters and then up to 8 meters. And when you get to the big transmission towers and whatnot, it's really easy to use. Unfortunately, it only covers the eastern seaboard at this stage. We've got everything in Queensland, New South Wales, with the exception of New South Wales trains. We don't have EVO in the ACT. We are talking to them at the moment. We are encouraging them to get on board. Ausgrid, all the big providers, Endeavour Energy, Transgrid, the transmission lines that take it from the power station to the local distributor, they're all in. Everything in Victoria, we're talking with Tassie. We've got everything in South Australia, and we're encouraging them. Again, it's a free service for use. So this comes into play when, if you acquired a site and you want to do a development on it. Again, like I said, that 3:30 trigger in your brain goes off. Get on the Before You Dig, go and find out what's it. You can also use the Look Up and Live. You go, okay, we've got some high voltage cables right across the front of our site. We're going to have to either get them relocated. We're going to have to think about moving plant and equipment, high loads, tippers, cranes, all those sorts of things, because you've got to think about how close you can get to those things. The other thing you can do through that, through the app, if you were to open up the page and you look at these power lines and they'll be in different colors, you can actually tap on the screen and it will tell you who owns it, and it'll tell you the voltage, and importantly, how to request safety advice. And you'll be able to open up, tap on the screen. That'll take you to another page that will be your local provider, and how to go about requesting safety advice, because you have to submit a construction works advice with lots of LGAs and whatnot before you set foot on site about looking after these things. So that's a great way to do it. And straight away, you've got a digital record that you have engaged with the asset owner. You've started that process going. You're keeping your site safe. You're keeping your people safe, keeping people connected. It's a really great kit. And as I said, we're very proud of it. We want to make this, mandatory across the country, that all of our overhead power providers are on there, because we think it's about keeping people safe. It's a really great tool they can use. But it doesn't end just at using the app. It's the mindset. Just like Before You Dig, it's using the app is just that first step in the process. Look Up and Live is a reminder. We want to make sure that every time you get in and out of your truck, have I, am I leaving site? Have I put the tipper down? Is the bucket down? Is everything secured on the back of the truck? Can I take a delivery in there? What's the height of my vehicle? All of those things. It's about the concept. It's not just using the app. As I said, we think that there's a use for this for everyone. Everyone who basically sets foot outside their front door.
Agreed. So I guess if we were to summarize all of this, mate, safety first.
Absolutely.
So this is all about not impacting danger to anyone. it is then, I guess, protection of the actual assets themselves. And then us as developers, we come along last, and that is, how do we actually connect our site to this? Whilst we want ourselves to be first, I'm very aware of where we sit in the order of hierarchy, mate.
No, that's not exactly true, Rob. I'm going to tell you, people, like property developers, they're people too, Look, it is
Only
about
some
people.
of us, mate. Only some.
It is definitely about people. It is people. That is, I could say, we've got 5 P's of safe excavation. I could throw another 3 on the front, because that's what I want. People, and then go to your 5 P's. Always be looking after that. This is the number one thing. Everyone has got a reason to go home, whether that reason is a family, a husband, a wife, and kids. People, your parents might be relying on you, or it could be you live alone and you've just got a little furry thing with 4 legs and a tail running around. Someone's always got a reason to go home in one piece. And your workmates, you've got a duty of care. I joke, I live in New South Wales, so I always joke, you have a duty of care to look after your workmates, even if they're Manly supporters. We have a duty of care to look after these people. That's the first one, and vice versa. They have to look after you that means turning up to work ready to go. You're game head on. You're fit. You're sober. You haven't had a bad night's sleep. You've had a good night's sleep, and you're clear. You're ready to go on. You're switched on. You're aware of the dangers. Do that. Keep the other people protected. The people walking past your work site. The sticky beaks that want to look over the fence. All these things. They've all got a duty of care to look out, to play their part in it. People coming onto your site, the people that rely on these assets, they rely on things being connected. As I said before, you don't want to go home to a house full of teenagers and no internet. I'd be just jumping on a plane and flying out of the place. There are all manner of people. Would you believe that there's a brewery that are members of Before You Dig, because they've got assets that they rely on to keep their brewery running? Now, if you knocked out the Telstra cable in the front of your street, you're not going to be famous. If you stop that brewery down in Adelaide from performing their duties, you're going to be famous, not for the right reason.
Yeah. So now I know this myth is not true, but there used to be a myth that the Forex brewery, which sits right beside Suncorp Stadium, used to have pipes directly into Suncorp Stadium, but that would be an asset that you would not want to dig up, I'm telling you now.
Exactly right. Imagine that on game day.
Imagine that on game day.
It's another great anecdote. If you disrupted the service outside the Taylor Swift concert, and it had to be evacuated, you would not be popular.
Yeah.
Forget the financial implications. Imagine your name being bandied about the papers and on all the news websites.
Yeah, I'm not going to go into the politics as to what kind of music I do or don't support. But Leon, mate, it's been amazing actually hearing from you. For anyone out there, I guess, that would like to know a little bit more about, I guess, the Before You Dig service, firstly, go to the website, byda.com.au. Secondly, we've actually had the Before You Dig Australia guys come and present to us, both in Adelaide and in Brisbane. We've also had had Cookie from Look Up and Live come and present to us in our Brisbane events. If you want to come to those events, we run these all the way around the country. So we run them in Brisbane, Sydney, Melbourne, and Adelaide, and soon to be Perth. They are both physical and also live stream. So no matter where you are located in the country, you can actually turn up and see these. Plus, we have a back catalogue of all the recordings of all of those if you actually want to go and look at the details, where you can actually see some of the implications of people who've not done it right and some of the dangers that are actually impacting. So, Leon, mate, it's been a pleasure. So thank you very much for your time today.
Pleasure's mine.
All good. And I'm going to say, folks, until next time, I hope to see you at one of our upcoming events. Till then, bye for now.